In the last 72 hours, Ukraine has launched its most coordinated drone offensive against Russian soil since the war began, striking targets across 6 regions and sending shockwaves through the Kremlin's inner circle. Russian military bloggers are openly questioning the effectiveness of their air defense networks, while official state media scrambles to downplay what local Telegram channels are calling a humiliating failure. The war is not frozen. It is accelerating, and the momentum has shifted decisively toward Kyiv's capacity to project power into the heart of Russia itself. This is not about a single battle. This is about the collapse of Russia's narrative of invulnerability, and what happens when a war of attrition becomes a war of humiliation. To understand the significance of these strikes, we need to step back briefly. For months, analysts and Western military officials have described the Ukraine war as entering a stalemate phase, trench warfare, grinding artillery duels, and incremental territorial gains measured in meters rather than kilometers. Russia's defensive strategy relied on layered air defenses and deep stockpiles of artillery shells, betting that Ukraine's Western support would eventually fracture under political and economic pressure. But Ukraine's military leadership has consistently signaled that it would not fight the war on Russia's terms. Instead, Kyiv has invested heavily in asymmetric capabilities, long-range drones, cruise missiles, and domestic weapons production designed to bypass Russia's frontline defenses entirely. The results are now visible. Strikes deep inside Russian territory are no longer one-off provocations. They are a systematic campaign to degrade Russia's military logistics, disrupt its energy sector, and, perhaps most importantly, shatter the psychological safety of the Russian populace. What exactly happened in the last 3 days? According to reports from independent Russian media outlets and verified by conflict monitoring groups, Ukraine conducted a coordinated drone barrage targeting at least 4 major military installations and 2 oil refineries across Russia's border regions. The strikes hit targets in Belgorod, Bryansk, Kursk, and, most significantly, the outskirts of Moscow itself, forcing temporary closures of Domodedovo and Nikovo airports for several hours. The scale is unprecedented. Independent military analysts estimate that Ukraine launched over 150 drones in a single wave, overwhelming Russia's S-300 and Panzer air defense systems. Citation needed. Videos circulating on Russian Telegram channels show drones striking fuel depots with precision, creating massive fireballs visible from dozens of kilometers away. The Institute for the Study of War noted in its most recent operational update that Ukrainian forces are systematically targeting Russia's reconnaissance strike infrastructure, the backbone of its offensive operations against Ukrainian cities. But the numbers alone don't tell the full story. What's remarkable is the evolution in Ukrainian drone technology. These are not improvised commercial quadcopters. They are purpose-built, long-range strike drones, some with a range exceeding 800 kilometers, designed specifically to penetrate Russia's radar coverage by flying at extremely low altitudes. Kyiv's domestic defense industry, financed in part by redirected Western aid, has scaled production to levels that outpace even optimistic pre-war projections. Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed to have intercepted most of the drones. But independent verification from satellite imagery and local reports contradicts this narrative. Geo-confirmed footage shows multiple impact sites with secondary explosions, indicating successful strikes on ammunition depots and fuel storage facilities. Even Russian military bloggers, who generally parrot the official line, are expressing growing alarm about the inability of air defense systems to cope with swarm tactics. Why now? And why at this scale? The immediate trigger appears to be Russia's renewed offensive operations in the Donetsk region, particularly around the town of Chasiv Yar and the strategic heights near Bakhmut. Russian forces have committed tens of thousands of additional troops to these sectors, attempting to achieve a breakthrough before Western-supplied F-16 fighter jets arrive in Ukrainian hands later this year. Ukraine's high command recognized a strategic dilemma. Attempting to match Russia's artillery and manpower advantage on the front lines is a losing proposition. Russia's defense industrial base, despite sanctions, continues to produce shells and missiles at a rate that outstrips Ukraine's Western partners. The solution, as Ukrainian general staff leaders have hinted in recent briefings, is to shift the conflict onto Russian territory, to impose costs on Russia's domestic economy and social stability rather than playing a purely defensive game. There is also a political dimension. Ukrainian officials are acutely aware that Western aid packages are under increasing pressure in the United States and Europe. The U.S. Congress has not passed major new military assistance since late 2023, and European stockpiles are running low. By demonstrating dramatic battlefield successes, even if limited to drone strikes on Russian soil, Kyiv hopes to reassure Western partners that Ukraine can win, and that continued investment is not wasted on a frozen conflict. But this strategy carries immense risks. Russia has repeatedly threatened retaliation for strikes on its internationally recognized territory, and recent Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities have intensified in response. The Kharkiv region has seen some of the heaviest bombardment since 2022, with civilian infrastructure being targeted in what Ukrainian authorities describe as a campaign of collective punishment. Russia's nuclear rhetoric has also ticked upward. Days before Ukraine's drone blitz, Russian state television aired a segment featuring a simulation of a nuclear strike on London, causing alarm among European defense ministries. Citation needed. While these broadcasts are often dismissed as propaganda, they serve a dual purpose, reinforcing domestic support for the war while warning the West that escalation is a two-way street. Beneath the military headlines, Russia's economy is quietly buckling under the weight of cumulative sanctions and war costs, and the drone strikes are exacerbating a sense of vulnerability that the Kremlin cannot easily manage. Russia's oil and gas revenues, once the backbone of its war budget, have fallen sharply in 2026. Western price caps, combined with Ukraine's strikes on export infrastructure and refineries, have forced Moscow to offer steep discounts to its remaining buyers, China and India. According to recent analyses, Russian crude is now trading at roughly 35% below Brent crude prices, narrowing Moscow's ability to finance its military machine. Inflation is another pressure point. Official Russian statistics show consumer prices rising at an annual rate of over 9%, but independent economists estimate real inflation is closer to 15 to 20% when accounting for shortages of imported goods. The ruble has weakened against the dollar and yuan, making imports more expensive and squeezing middle-class Russians who previously took for granted access to Western brands and electronics. More critically, Russia's labor shortage is becoming acute. The defense sector has absorbed hundreds of thousands of workers, pulling them from civilian industries and driving up wages in military factories while leaving hospitals, schools, and manufacturing plants understaffed. Putin's government has attempted to offset this with convict recruitment campaigns, but these come with their own social and political costs. Rising crime rates in communities where prisoners are returned home after service, and fraying social cohesion in the regions that have borne the heaviest conscription burdens. The drone strikes on Russian border regions have also triggered a wave of internal displacement. Independent media estimates suggest over 200,000 Russians have left Belgorod and Kursk oblasts since the start of 2025, relocating to Moscow, St. Petersburg, or neighboring countries like Georgia and Kazakhstan. Citation needed. This internal migration is not openly discussed in state-controlled media, but local officials in affected regions have privately expressed concern about the strain on housing and social services. Social pressure is perhaps the most unpredictable variable. Russian society has largely accepted the war as a background condition, but the growing visibility of drone strikes, videos of explosions spreading across Telegram, evacuated families moving into shelters, is slowly eroding the life-goes-on normalization that the Kremlin has relied upon to sustain public support. Sustaining morale in the face of direct military pressure on Russian soil is a different challenge from sustaining it during a distant, special operation in Ukraine. Ukraine's drone campaign is not a war-winning strategy on its own. It will not expel Russian forces from occupied territories, nor will it force Putin to the negotiating table tomorrow. But it represents a fundamental shift in the nature of the conflict, one where Russia is no longer a sanctuary for its own military and political leadership, and where the costs of war are becoming visible in Russian skies and Russian homes. The fundamental question is this: can Ukraine sustain this campaign without provoking a Russian response that escalates beyond conventional warfare? And can the Kremlin absorb the psychological blow of seeing its homeland struck repeatedly, while its economy fractures and its international standing erodes? These are not academic questions. They are the contours of the next phase of this war, a phase that will test Ukraine's resolve, Russia's resilience, and the West's willingness to keep supporting a fight that shows no sign of ending. If you're following the evolving battlefield dynamics and want to stay informed, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. And in the comments below, tell us, is Ukraine's drone offensive a tactical success that can be sustained, or is it a dangerous provocation that risks catastrophic escalation? Let us know your perspective. Thank you for watching.